Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of the 1871 podcast. And our very special guest on tonight's episode is Reading goal-scoring legend Trevor Senior. So really looking forward to speaking to Trevor, who was on Series 1. He's back on again tonight. But before we speak to Trevor, of course, there's a very big game for Reading tonight as Huddersfield take on Sheffield United, and a win or a draw for Huddersfield would see Reading relegated to League One. But if Sheffield United win, then it will go to the final game on Monday, Huddersfield against Reading. And if Reading win that game, they will be safe. And that's because Huddersfield are currently 3 points ahead of Reading, and Huddersfield are on minus 18 goal difference and Reading are on minus 20 goal difference. So basically, if Huddersfield lose both of their remaining games, they would, of course, be on a minus 20 goal difference or worse. And Reading, by virtue of beating Huddersfield, would be on minus 19 or better. So in that scenario, Reading would stay up on goal difference and Huddersfield would be relegated. And we've got Andy Carroll back on Monday. So it'd be nice, wouldn't it, if Sheffield United win tonight and Andy Carroll pops up with a late winner on Monday to keep Reading up and send Huddersfield and Mr. Warnock down. So that'd be nice. But we need a win for Sheffield United tonight, or Reading will be relegated to League One. So we'll be looking at that game and keeping our fingers crossed. So it's time now for a chat with Royals legend Trevor Senior. Trevor, welcome back to the 1871 podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's great to have you back. An absolute legend as a goal scorer for Reading. And before we speak to Trevor, here's a reminder of his goal scoring exploits during his time at Reading. Trevor made more than 360 appearances for Reading and scored, according to my records, 190 goals. But I was chatting to Trevor before this, and Trevor, you think it's only 184, don't you?
Yeah, that's what I've always thought. But I do agree with what you're saying. They do seem. Some say 190, 191. I'll take that. They've obviously included training.
Right. We could round it up to 200. How's that?
Easier.
Maybe
you scored 6. Yeah, maybe you scored 6 goals with your eyes closed or something.
Scored most of them with my eyes closed.
Okay, so look, just want to continue my introduction to you, Trevor, just to give people a refresh of, that magnificent sort of goal scoring tally that you had back in the 80s. And back in 1983, Kerry Dixon left Reading to join Chelsea, and he just scored 32 goals for Reading in the 82-83 season. But then Trevor Senior arrived as Kerry Dixon's replacement, and he promptly scored 41 goals in his first season as Reading won promotion from Division 4. And then he was top scorer for the next 3 seasons as well, scoring 27, 31 and 24 goals. And then, Trevor, you joined Watford and then Middlesbrough, but you rejoined Reading in 1988. And you were top scorer for the next 3 seasons with 24, 22 and 15 goals. And, Trevor, you're still the all-time record goal scorer for Reading in a season with 41 goals, although Jimmy Quinn did get close with 40 in the 93-94 season. And you're the all-time record goal scorer for Reading as well. So, Trevor, I just want to ask you whether it is 184 or 190 or whatever it might be. Perhaps 190 was including friendly goals or something like that. I don't know. But just regardless of that, whether it's 184 or 190, how proud do you feel, looking back now all those years ago, about what you achieved for Reading?
Oh, immensely proud, I must admit. It doesn't matter what the total was. I don't brag about it too much, but it's always nice to have in the back of your mind that you're one of 96 people in the world, basically, or the country, that hold the record for their club. And I'm immensely proud.
And Trevor, before we talk about some of your memories of your time at Reading, it's obviously a very big game for Reading tonight. Reading been in the top 2 divisions for just over 20 years now. That famous promotion with the Jamie Curitan goal at Brentford And since then, it's been Championship and 3 seasons in the Premier League. So a massive game for Reading tonight, as Reading will be relegated if Huddersfield draw or win against Sheffield United. So what's your gut feeling, Trevor? Do you think Sheffield United will win and it will go to the final game on Monday, or do you think Huddersfield will get the point that they need to send Reading down?
I'm hoping that Sheffield United haven't sort of finished their season and thinking about the beach and their holidays already, because obviously being promoted. But they're professionals, so they'll want to finish on a high with a home game, and hopefully they can do Reading a favour so it goes to the last game and all to play for, and then it's just on the day then, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think one factor that might work in Reading's favour is Sheffield United are going for a points record, which is Neil Warnock's points record, most points for Sheffield United. I think they can still beat that with their last. I think they've got 2 games to go. So let's hope. Let's keep our fingers crossed. But Trevor, can I just ask you? We'll know tonight whether it's going to go to the last game. But if Reading are relegated into League One, whether it's tonight or whether it's Monday, what are the implications of relegation for Reading if that does happen?
Well, any relegation's not good, is it really? I came close a couple of times, but I was lucky enough not to get relegated. Once with Watford, and managed to get sold to Middlesbrough before Watford went down, so I don't count that. And with Reading, I think there was it was mentioned a week or so ago, we went to Chesterfield the last game of the season, and staring relegation in the face, and we didn't realise how bad it was really, and ended up winning the game 4-2. And I can remember us celebrating on the coach on the way home, and I think we were celebrating being 6th from bottom. But that's what Reading would do just to stay up in that league, because it's a long season to try and turn it around and come back up again straight away. I think Martin Hicks touched on that a couple of nights ago, and but yeah, they don't want to get relegated, and with the setup that they've got there, I'm sure they want to stay in the Championship, and all the Reading fans obviously do as well.
Well, let's see what happens tonight. But if Reading do go down, I think it's worth mentioning that the 3 teams that went down last season from the Championship, they're all doing well this season, and 2 of them are going to be in the playoffs. One's just going to miss out, I think. So let's see first. Let's not sort of talk too much about what happens if they go down, because we don't know if it's going to happen yet. Keep our fingers crossed. And Johnny, I'm going to hand over to you now. What do you want to ask Trevor? Oh, Johnny, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. Just a work thing there going. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, Trevor, I was just going to ask you, obviously the amount of goals that you scored, did you set yourself target at the start of each season, or did you just sort of see what happened as you went along? Or were you in your head, right, 15 goals, 20 goals? How did you motivate yourself?
I don't, all through my career, like when I was playing non-league at Dorchester, I never set targets. As a centre forward, you want to score as many as you can. I think it made a big difference my first season at Reading, is because, as Mark said earlier, Kerry Dixon had gone to Chelsea, and obviously he was a big Reading favourite, and he went there and he hit the ground running, scoring very regularly. So not that I thought about that, but I did keep my eye on what he was doing, and luckily I got off to a great start that first season. And then once I got that record in the first season, that was great. And then you just want to keep scoring every season, and the longer the time goes on, and you sort of, I'd be lying if I said I didn't sort of keep an eye on what I was doing and try and to score one in every other game was more than I dreamt of, really.
Yeah. And did you ever have what was kind of I remember the longest spell that you went without scoring? Did you? I think probably with that goal you scored, it wasn't very long.
I had a couple of spells where I didn't score. Talking about Reading now, when I left Reading, there was quite a lot of months where I didn't score. But for Reading, I think it was probably about 12 games, something like that. Maybe not quite as many as that, but I can remember doing an interview prior to the Arsenal game in the FA Cup, and I can remember Ian Bramford saying that it worried him, but not too much. And that was obviously a G-up I needed, and I managed to score against Arsenal, although we lost. So that stopped that one. And then when Mark McGee was manager, I was on a bit of a bad run toward just before I got released, actually. And I think I can't remember when I ended up scoring, but that was a long run of not scoring. But
do you, when you're in that, do you try and change anything about your game, or do you just keep doing what's worked for you previously?
I don't think I was clever enough to change my game. I think what you saw with me was what you got, and I wasn't good enough to change my game. I relied on supply, and the way we played, our style of football. It wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but it was exciting in those days. I touched on it before when I spoke to you, but the pitches were different, and it was a bit more. There was more chances created through mistakes, and I thrived on that. So I just kept trying to get in the right places, and just hopefully that the crosses came in or the balls would play through. Mainly crosses coming in. That's what I thrived on, and set plays, corners, etc. So no, I didn't really change my game too much.
And being at Elm Park, we've got a lot of younger folks that listen to us, watch us, that have never been to Elm Park. Can you kind of sum it up, what it was like as a player coming out onto the pitch, the atmosphere, the games, the stadium?
Yeah, well, you look at the stadium they play at now. There's quite a walk from the dressing room up the steps, etc. At Reading, it was like walking out your back door into your garden. It was sort of 20 steps, and you were out from the dressing room onto the pitch, and the other door from the dressing room, 6 or 7 steps, and you were out on the street talking to the public. Because they were walking past the dressing room. It was that close, and the atmosphere was always great. The South Bank, the Tylehurst End, and the main stand. You call it a main stand. It wasn't massive, but yeah, it was a great atmosphere. And I love the evening games. I must admit, the Tuesday nights. I think I probably scored quite a lot of goals on the evening games. That was a better atmosphere. When it was dark. The crowd behind you, and obviously in the winter on Saturdays as well when it's dark. You can't really explain it. It was just, but I think the difference probably was then compared to stadiums now. You could hear every comment, well, nearly every comment, especially people slagging you off or or giving you a G up. It's almost like you could touch the fans, and it was like a one-to-one conversation you could have, and it's a bit different now. But great days, and like you say, the younger element, they may not be interested either, but because they've only grown up with the stadiums like they are now, and but if you look at a lot of the stadiums now, there seem to be a lot of people standing, even though they got seats. It was. I don't know whether it was the standing that made a difference, but they were packed in a bit more, which obviously I could see why the stadiums have changed. They needed changing for safety reasons, but no, great atmospheres.
The tin roof and everything, wasn't it? Though in the old days, it was and the lights and everything. Those evening games, brilliant. Do you have a particular one at Elm Park for you that was probably your favourite game?
I enjoyed the Newcastle game in the League Cup where we drew 3-3. I think my first game at home, it would probably be my first game at home, Colchester in the League Cup second leg, and I scored a hat-trick. That was a great start for me. I think I may have scored the following Saturday a hat trick as well against Southend. No, was it Stockport? Sorry, Stockport. Yeah. But no, that Colchester game, I remember scored a couple of volleys as well, and I was pleased with them. But that was a good atmosphere.
And what was the toughest away ground that you went to in those days? Because like a lot of them were pretty similar to Elm Park. Where was the place you kind of went, oh god?
I think not the worst ground, but one of the worst times that I remember. We played Crewe Alexandra away, and we'd gone up to Blackpool and stayed overnight. Not stayed overnight. We stayed for about a week. As a mid-season break, and we arrived. It was a Friday night game, and we arrived at Crewe, and it was we managed to go 6 days early, but got there late for the game, and it was the coldest night I think I've ever played in. And Steve Richardson, our fullback, he would vouch for that, because I can remember this tiny little bath that we had to and a shower that we had to defrost him. Really, he was absolutely frozen. We drew 1 each. David Crown scored the equaliser, and that was probably one of the worst things I can remember. That was a horrible night.
And Trevor, just thinking about some of your other sort of favourite memories during your time at Reading, I'm sure it's got a lot to do with the goals that you scored. But if you think back to that record-breaking run of 13 games at the start of the season, it was just amazing. It must have been, it's fantastic for the fans, but that must have been something really special for the players to be part of that.
Yeah, it was unbelievable. And there's quite a few sort of memories in those games. One of them for me is, I think it was against Chesterfield at home. Well, I know it was at Chesterfield at home, where there was no TV coverage of games, and I remember getting a cut on my head and having 6 stitches and coming back on and scoring a hat trick, 2 headers, and that was in that run. So that was a big memory for me. Plymouth game at home, that's probably one of the best games, if not the best game I've played in, where we made the comeback. Kevin Bremer obviously was a big part of that. Dean Horrocks and the lads just turned that game around. Plymouth away, in that run, we won the game. And I said before, Ian Branfoot shouted to Gary Westwood about diving one way, and he dived the other way and saved the penalty. If he'd listened to or heard the manager, the run would have been over. And obviously culminating in the Newport game, that I'll never forget that. We were all on the coach, and the amount of fans that travelled down the M4, it's just unbelievable. And although I didn't score in that game, that was Kevin and Stuart Bevan's day. That day they got the 2 goals, which was great. And then we had 2 more games, Lincoln away, where we won 1-0. The only overhead kick I ever scored, I think. And then obviously the Wolves game, that was going back to the atmosphere that we were talking about just now. That was a great atmosphere that night. Just a shame we didn't get the win.
Yeah, it was a fantastic game. I was there, and that's one of my favourite, most memorable Reading games of all time. That was just, as you say, just a fantastic atmosphere. And even though the run came to an end, it was a great game.
I got a feeling, I think the ticker on the turnstiles didn't add up properly that night.
Yeah, that's the rumour. More than a rumour, I think.
Well, you could just see it. There were so many people there.
Yeah. Trevor, I just wanted to ask you about something you mentioned earlier. We talked about Kerry Dixon and what he went on to achieve at Chelsea, and you said you sort of kept an eye a little bit on what he was doing. You obviously sort of were at Reading for a long time, and then you went away and came back again. But were you, at any stage, with Kerry Dixon in mind and what he went on to achieve, played for England, all those goals for Chelsea, in your mind, were you hopeful of, sort of emulating somebody like Kerry Dixon went on to achieve?
Yes, obviously, Kerry came from a similar background to myself. He came from Dunstable when Maurice Evans signed him, and I came from Dorchester, non-league. and he went on to great things. He did well for Reading, and as you say, he went on to Chelsea, which is the club I've supported anyway. So I've always keep an eye on them. And when I left Reading to join Watford, the style of play with Dave Bassett as manager, because bearing in mind I was 25, 26, and I'd been scoring goals, I thought, it was just going to carry on. Came down with a big bump. It didn't carry on at all, and it was a lot different. And I'd love to have emulated what Kerry did, but I wasn't good enough. That's the bottom line. And although I went to Middlesbrough and played like the old Championship, really, once we got up to the top level again, I wasn't quite good enough for that. But so it was nice to get a taste of it, and I admire people that go on to play at that level and be successful as Kerry did and play for your country. That's great. But no, I thought I was going to do it, but I didn't.
I'm going to bring Johnny back in now because he's actually on a work break, and I know you've got about 5 minutes, haven't you, Johnny? So I'll let you take over the next 5 minutes.
Yeah. So, Trevor, what was your the 3 favourite players that you played with at Reading, and why? In the time you were there.
Obviously, I enjoyed playing with all the lads. And that's not being corny. There was no one in my career at Reading where I didn't like. That was a good
players to play with. That you.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, we put me on the spot a little bit, but obviously Michael Jokes is right up there. Dean Horrocks was an absolute joy to play with in the early days. Obviously, Jokesy came a little bit later, and Jokesy was just it was just great to play with. Different player than Dean. I've got lots of respect. If I look at forward players, obviously that's what my main thing is. But the likes of Hicksy, I think even in the day, Hicksy would get a little bit of stick at times, but Hicksy was a good footballer and he was brilliant at what he did. That ball came into the box defensively, he always headed it away. He always got his head on it. So I put in a defender there with the 2 attacking players. There's lots of other ones, Stuart Bevan, David Crine, Jerry Williams, Steve Wood, the goalkeepers. We had some good players. And Kevin Bremner, a different type of player, but all action. And but if I'll pin those 3 down. I'll put them on the spot. Yeah.
And under the managers you played under, how were their styles before a game? Was you sitting in a again, for people that have never played, sitting in a change room before a game, what is it, what goes on with the stuff that you can say?
Well, to be fair to Maurice Evans and Ian Branford, who were my 2 managers for quite a bit of the time, especially Ian, they always did their homework on the other teams. So they'd give us a rundown on who we're playing against. And I was one of the jokers of the dressing room, but I'm not trying to be a big time person, but I would always try and make it a bit light-hearted. I would throw in silly little comments at the right time. So it was serious, but it got to a stage where, especially Ian Branford, if he said something, he knew that there was going to be something coming, and I used to sit just to the right of him. He would look, have you got anything to say, sort of thing. But it was the dressing room was so small. We used to do a warm up in the dressing room. It's like doing a warm up at 11 players in your lounge. Because you had the bench in the middle where for treatment, and there was no room, and we always used to do a warm up in the dressing room before we went out. Like stretches and running on the spot, things like that, which probably you would never see now. And I don't know if anybody else did it, but that's what we used to do. And it seems strange, really, but just very tight and compact. But yeah, the managers did their homework. Even the other managers that came in, they always did a rundown on the other team. You know, the Ian Porterfields, Mark McGee, and Colin Lee, and all those. They always gave us a rundown on the other team, but also how we were going to play and what we needed to do. But we knew how to play because we worked on it in training every day. It was just shadow play and get the ball in the channel for me or whoever's playing alongside me to run after, play, get it wide, get the ball in the box. It wasn't rocket science.
Do you think nowadays football's gone to, I don't know the word, like, you know, football is easy game to play, or, you know, now the way that it's gone, the systems and all the zonal marking, all this, do you think it's kind of made the game less enjoyable or harder, or?
I had this discussion on Friday actually with a few mates. We were just sat having a pint, and two of us sort of said that we think at times football's boring now compared to how it was. And then I didn't see the Arsenal-Man City game last week, but I was following it online. And my argument was that they said, "Oh, it was a great game to watch." And don't get me wrong, those players are brilliant. The skill level now, and you know, the way they play is good. But there was no corners or no shots on target in the first 25, 30 minutes. So I said, not watching the game, I said, how can it be exciting when there's been no shots on target? You know, but then you'll get other games which are really exciting, but the level of passing on the pitches that they play, and you know, they just pass for fun, and it's a joy to watch if you like that sort of football. But I don't know, I'm a bit old-fashioned.
Thanks so much, Trevor.
Okay,
Johnny,
enjoy your work.
All right, I think Johnny's off now. All right, thank you, Johnny. So, Trevor, just want to ask you, talking about the different styles of play with football in general now. What do you think the secret was to your success as a goal scorer, particularly at Reading? And how much of that was to do with the style of play under Ian Bramford, for example?
Yeah, that without a doubt, and even with Morris, you know, the style we played, we got crosses in. If you look at the football nowadays, how often do they get to the byline and you think, oh, they're going to cross it? They turn out, play it back to the fullback, build again, go the other side, you know, get 20 passes before they get another chance to get a cross in. You know, they'll get in the final third out wide, and then they'll turn, and then the ball's played back. Before you know, it's back in with their own keeper. But I would get frustrated with that because, you know, I think the closest, you know, and he is a class player or class goal scorer, Haaland at Man City, you know, he doesn't get involved too much in the game, but they've got enough quality that. And he's probably one where he thrives on crosses. They do get a few more crosses in for him. And he's not going to score loads with his head, but he just scores with any part of his body, doesn't he? Yeah, he can. He just. And I'm nowhere near like him, but I do enjoy watching him specifically, watching his runs, because I think that's the sort of thing I did. You know, I didn't get involved too much in the build-up play, but I was ready to get on the end of a cross, and he's probably the closest one in the top level that gets on crosses, really.
And talking of, if you like, a generic term for, inverted commas, old-fashioned centre forwards, I think you'd fall into that category, and that's a compliment, not otherwise. All the goals you scored, you were a goal scorer. No two ways about that. But do you think the type of player that you were for Reading? I mean, you mentioned Haaland, but he's got pace, strength. He's got everything, hasn't he?
Yeah.
In terms of going back to the 80s and previous to that, you did get quite a few, real number 9s, goal scorers, and that was your job, really, wasn't it? You weren't really involved in the build-up play.
No.
You were there to score goals. That's sort of gone missing, hasn't it, really? I mean, Haaland's scoring plenty of goals, but he's more than a goal scorer. But that kind of old-fashioned sense forward doesn't really exist anymore, does it?
No, it doesn't. No, you've got to have more to your game, all right. And like you say, he's got pace. But if you analyse a lot of his goals, the only comparison I can draw to myself is he gets a lot of goals with less than one or two touches. He's there's other players at the top level that have got great ability, and they can afford to take people on in the box. Most of my goals were scored with one or two touch. Getting on the end of things. If I took more than two touches, I usually lost it. I'm not saying Haaland can't do that because he's young. He's just got more to his game, full stop. But there's the standard of the forwards now is a different type of forward. You've got to be able to play and pass and interchange with people and play in different roles. Harry Kane, he's more of a midfield player a lot of the time, but he still gets his goals, but he scores different types of goals. He's got a bit more to his game. But no, it's interesting to watch. I still love watching football, but the other night, was it Sunday when Liverpool played? That was a good game to watch because it was entertaining. There was lots of chances. 3-0 down, came back to 3-3, then they scored the winner. That sort of thing. It must have been great to have been watching that game live. But you don't get quite as many as that now. And I guess Andy Carroll, I haven't seen a lot of him obviously since he's been at Reading, but he's a little bit more old-fashioned type centre forward, I would imagine as well. And hopefully he'll get the winning goal, like you said.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll have to see how it goes tonight first. And just talk. You mentioned Andy Carroll there. Nobody has scored as many goals in a season as you did. Jimmy Quinn got close within one goal of you. He got 40 goals, but you got 41 that season. First of all, that season, did it go better than you expected? Were you expecting to get anywhere near that number of goals, 41 goals?
No, not at all. Although, no, it didn't. Not at that level. For Dorchester, when I was playing there, before Christmas, before I left to go to Portsmouth, I think I'd scored something like about the same amount, including pre-season games and all that. I was scoring 3, 4s and 2s and regularly up until Christmas. So that was the only other time where I scored that many goals. But the Jimmy Quinn time when he looked to break it, I was actually at that game at Bournemouth, and he got within one, and I was sat in the stand and he hit one top corner, and the keeper made one hell of a save to keep it out. So that could have gone. But I think the difference now, I might have to eat my words one day, but I don't think it should get broken because the players don't play as many games. Back in our day, 40 plus games, 46 in a season, the likes of Hicksy and a few of us would play that many games in a season because the squads were so small. We probably only had a squad of about 16 senior pros made up of a couple of apprentices and a couple of youth players, because you only had one or two subs on the bench, no sub goalkeeper or anything like that. But now they rotate players, even Haaland, you look at him, going back to him, he doesn't finish many games. He'd be on about 125 goals at the moment if he played the whole game, but he scores 2 or 3 and then they bring him off. But I don't think the likes of the other teams not creating as many chances, I hope it doesn't get broken anyway.
And it's, I remember that season, when you went up as champions, Cannon League Division 3 back then, wasn't it? The record start.
Yeah.
And it was, it was a particular brand of football, you could say, but it's very effective, wasn't it? And it really suited you as a goal scorer. And and we mentioned Kerry Dixon, and then obviously you came in, scored all those goals, and Reading have had some great goal scorers, Jimmy Quinn included, since then. Which of the sort of Reading goal scorers since your time at Reading have really stood out for you?
Well, since I left,
Yeah.
Well, obviously Jamie Curtin, he scored lots of goals. Noel Hunt scored some. Memory loss.
Adam Lafondra, obviously.
Adam Lafondra and Shane Long. Different. That's what I was trying to think of. Sorry, apologies, Shane. But I think all round, I think Jimmy Quinn's got to be probably the best. I would say, because he could play football as well. He's a decent footballer as well, and he's a big lad. Scored all sorts of goals, and I'd probably go for him, really.
Yeah, and I just want to ask you about after football, when you stopped playing, you did go into management in non-league, and I think you were manager as recently as 2016, and up until a few years ago, you were assistant manager, and you managed, I think, Weymouth, Bridport, Bashley, and Bridgewater, and then you went back to Bridport as manager between 2009 2016. Obviously, you like teams beginning with B.
Yeah.
And you've been assistant manager at Dorchester Town as well. That's the club you played for before you joined Reading. I'm guessing, Trevor, your real joy in football was scoring goals. So what was it like, compared to playing and scoring goals, being a manager?
Well, I've got to be honest, management was something I would never even thought about doing. I don't class myself as a coach. I used to drive the minibus. That's the closest I got to a coach. But it was very Western League, most of it, with Bridgewater and mainly Bridport. Yes, it's completely different. With playing, you just turn up for your training, and you don't have the worries. But as a manager, it's completely different. It's 24/7, even at that level. If you're doing it properly, if I do something, I do it properly. And it was it took up your whole week, because those clubs that you're talking about, not many of them are on contracts, so if you had to try and keep players happy. Otherwise, they would leave 7 days. They go to another club, But I go back to my sense of humour and spirit, and that I think I generated a good spirit, especially with Bridport. I had quite a few years there with the two spells, and I really enjoyed that. And we probably underachieved for a couple of seasons, but the players were all there playing because they wanted to play at a reasonable level for them. And they weren't after money because we didn't have a big budget or anything like that. It was interesting. I loved it. And then, as you said, towards the end, I had about 3 or 4 seasons with Dorchester as assistant manager, which is literally a stone throw from where I live. And then 2019, October time, I just sort of, a couple of weeks before I actually called it a day, it just didn't seem the same. I thought maybe I'm getting too old for this. My jokes had fallen on deaf ears because half the people that I'm joking about they hadn't heard of because they're younger. The music in the dressing room was just not my type of music. It didn't motivate me at all. And I called it a day, 2019 October.
Well, you say that about your age, but obviously you look at Roy Hodgson, Sam Allardyce. If you wanted to, you've probably got a good 10, 15 years left at least, haven't you, if you wanted to go back into management?
The man we've been talking about tonight as well, the big game tonight, Neil Warner. Yeah, he's I've got to be honest with you. I never thought I'd say it, but I do enjoy my weekends off now.
Assuming, isn't it? I mean,
my son,
as a manager,
my son's an assistant manager at Wimborne, so he was at Hamworthy last year, and they did really well, and got to the FA Vars semi-final. Unfortunately, they lost, but so I tended to sort of watch him, and I don't interfere, but so I'd rather, he's young enough to hopefully take it a little bit further, and he's gone to Wimbledon now, so that's not that far from me. So yeah, I'll leave it now.
And Martin Hicks was telling us about the time that he was manager at Newbury Town, and he said that he had a few of the ex-Reading players joined him there. I guess the Reading players from your time were probably a bit too old by then, were they? Did you have any of your ex kind of connections at Reading involved in any of the time as a manager?
No, I didn't. But the only thing I did use Reading for, they kindly brought a team down for one of the Bridport players as a testimonial, and that's going back quite a few years ago now. So the chap whose testimony it was really pleased, and it was mainly a reserve side. And I can't think. There was one player in particular who went on to do well. So he went to Notts Forest in the end. But yeah, so that's the closest I came to anybody coming from Reading.
And Trevor, just want to take it back now to the current Reading side. I mean, so many changes at Reading, and we asked Martin about this as well when we spoke to him. But you had at Reading in the early 80s, 40 years ago, the club was nearly merged with Oxford United, and then obviously you had that record-breaking Royal season, and then on into the 90s with Mark McGee and getting close to getting into the Premiership back then, and then Sir John Medeski, Steve Coppell, Brian McDermott, and all the success with the 3 seasons in the Premier League, and it's just gone on a bit of a downward spiral since then. What's your overall feeling about the progress that the club made, over those years, and what's happened in the last few years? How do you feel about all of that?
Well, it was great, really, wasn't it? The few years before, where Sir John was, obviously the new stadium, and it was all new, and they had some decent players, and they did really well. I can't really comment on the political side of things because I don't know. There's no point in me trying to guess. But the Reading fans seem to stick through it. But this season they seem to start quite well, but then it just sort of fell away a bit. And I don't know. There must be a reason for that. And obviously, people that watch every week, I'm sure they'll tell us the reasons, what they think. And yeah, it's just a shame, I think. And I just hope tonight the result goes well, so that they've got something to get their teeth into, and or if they can guarantee coming straight back up next season, if they did go down, we may look back in a year's time and say that was the best thing that happened. They regrouped, and the crowds were, full houses because they're top of the league. But we don't want to. I don't think they want to gamble like that, do they? Really?
No, although having said that, the 3 clubs that went down from the Championship last year are doing well this season. So, we'll have to wait and see what happens tonight first. But just want to ask you, Trevor, obviously you don't know what's happening at the club at the moment, but how much of an impact do you think it makes, if you think back to your time with Roger Smee as the chairman, and then Sir John Medeski coming in, and now we've had, since Sir John Medeski, we've had a series of, owners from other countries. How much of a difference do you think it makes if that club's got that kind of sort of local identity, if you like, that comes from the top, from people like Roger Smee, who used to play for Reading before he was chairman, and then John Medeski comes in and he's a Reading man. How much of a difference and an impact does having someone like that at the top really make for the club as a whole, do you think?
Well, obviously, you might be able to answer this question more than myself, but I think that Roger Smee, Sir John, they were more hands-on. You know, they didn't interfere, and all the directors that were directors at the time were very much part of the club, and you know, all the vice presidents, etc. It was like a big happy family. You know, I don't know whether that's the same, and that's probably Reading is no different than a lot of clubs, you know. But then, if they need the investment now from foreign investment or whatever, I don't. And maybe that's a bit. That's where it differs. I don't know. But that's all I can say from when I was there. You know, you could approach those chairmen and directors that I've just mentioned there. And you know, the Roy Tranters and Jim Brooks in the early days, all those sort of people. They travelled on the coach, and you know, you respected them. The respect was there. I'm not saying that the respect isn't there now, but I don't know. I just wonder whether it's all a bit sort of, you know, a bit distant, maybe. Whether
that's one
that would make a difference. Hands on.
Yeah, it's one of the criticisms from a lot of Reading fans that it does seem to be a bit of a disconnect. There do seem to be signs of improvement with director of football and all those sorts of things. So it does feel like there's been a bit of an improvement, but it might be a bit too late. You know, for this current chapter in Reading's history. But we might find out tonight. If Reading are relegated, if not, it goes to the final game. So let's keep our fingers crossed. But what do you hope for the sort of coming years for Reading, Trevor? Given what's happened over the last few years.
Just to be competitive, really, at the right end of the table, or everybody likes a good cup run, but you've got to be really lucky to win a major trophy. Obviously, the Simol Cup, no one thought that was a major trophy until Reading won 2 or 3 games, and I was unfortunately not to be part of that. But any good cup run is great, and if you can get to a final, that's even better, and that will go down in history, as we know. But your league, your bread and butter over the course of a season is what they want, and they need something to cheer about and get behind. They've suffered a little bit, haven't they, the Reading fans, over the last couple of years through whatever reason, and that's what I would hope for, that they can be at the right end of the table, so they're not looking over their shoulder. I know the 6-point deduction doesn't help, but you want to be looking up rather than over your shoulder. So and just try and get those days back. I don't know how many players they will keep, who's on contract from the group there at the moment, or whether they'll recruit over the summer. Like you say, tonight's game and the Huddersfield game, that probably be a decider on that.
Yeah. All right. Well, Trevor, thanks ever so much for joining us again. Been an absolute pleasure to speak to you again. Really appreciate your time. And keep our fingers crossed for tonight's game.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Mark. All the best.
Thanks, Trevor. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you.